Glad you can join us today. So let's just take a few moments to arrive ourselves, slowing down from whatever has been happening for us until this time of gathering in this session. And in a moment, we'll start the session with doing, as we usually do on Sundays, with some chanting and recitation. So I'm just putting that link to the booklet in the chat so you have easy access. Okay, taking a few deep, slower breaths, feeling the ground beneath you, grounding, slowing down, arriving, and welcoming each and every one of you. So glad you can join us. Okay, so let's begin then with the recitation and chanting. And hand over to you, Kittisaro.
Let's begin at the top of page 3 by honoring the Buddha. The ancient way, Namo Tassa, Bhagavato in Pali and in English. And then chanting the refuges, the sources of inspiration, where we go to realign with true principle, which is the refuge, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, and the 5 precepts, what the Buddha called the 5 great gifts, offering immeasurable beings freedom from fear, hostility, and oppression. When we train ourselves to refrain from harming, that offers immeasurable beings freedom from fear, hostility, and oppression. Just that sincere intention in the heart and acting on that, similar with all the precepts. Number 2, refraining from taking what doesn't belong to us, refraining from exploitative, sensual, sexual activity. That's a gift, not dominating, harming ourselves or others, refraining from false speech, harsh speech, divisive speech, meaningless speech, again, are great gifts. Refraining from intoxicants that confuse the mind, lead to heedlessness, is a great gift. So we'll recite these in Pali and then in English, and then finished by Om Shanti is a gesture of this gift. Om means honoring, deep honoring the totality. Shanti is with peace. We're making an offering of peace. So let's start like that.
Again, chanting books in the chat.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi Dhammaṃ saranang gacchāmi Sangham saranang gacchāmi Dutiyampi Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi Dutiyampi Dhammaṃ saranang gacchāmi Dutiyampi Sangham saranang gacchāmi Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi Tatiyampi Dhammaṃ saranang gacchāmi Tatiyampi Sangham saranang gacchāmi Panatipata Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. I undertake the training to refrain from intentionally taking life. Adinadana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. I undertake the training to refrain from taking that which is not given. Kame sumecha chala veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the training to refrain from misuse of sexuality and the senses. Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the training to refrain from speech that is false, divisive, harsh, and meaningless. Sura merayama japamadatana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the training to refrain from intoxication which leads to carelessness. Om Shanti. Om Shanti. Om Shanti. Qualities of the Triple Jewel on page 4. Itipiso bhagava arahant samma sambuddho vijjajalana sambano sukhato lokavidu annuddharo apurisadhammasarate sada devamanusana buddho bhagavati savakato bhagavata dhammo sanditiko akalingo ehipasiko oamannaiko pajatam vedetabo venyuhi tisupatipanno bhagavato savakasangho uchupatipanno bhagavato savakasangho yayapatipanno bhagavato savakasangho samicipatipanno bhagavato savakasangho yati Tang Cetari Purisayugania Tapuri Sambhogala He Sampagavato Savaka Sangho Ahanayo Bahanayo Dakinayo Anjali Kalaniyo Anutaram Bunyakena Loka Sani. On page 8, sending forth the blessing of the divine abidings, the Brahma Viharas, kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. Now let us make the four boundless qualities shine forth.
I will abide,
Pervading one quarter with a heart imbued with loving kindness. Likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth. So above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself. I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a heart imbued with loving kindness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading one quarter, with a heart imbued with compassion. Likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth. So above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself. I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a heart imbued with compassion, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading one quarter, with a heart imbued with gladness. Likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth. So above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself. I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a heart imbued with gladness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading one quarter, with a heart imbued with equanimity. Likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth. So above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself. I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a heart imbued with equanimity, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. Great Compassion Mantra on page 12. Mandola
Going into a meditation period of just whatever posture you find comfortable. Some of you sitting on the floor, on a cushion or in a chair. Some of you may be laying down, standing up. It's finding the way of supports your body in an optimum way, given what you're working with now, in terms of the capacity of your body, your physical body, and what is most supportive. And whatever posture you're moving into, as far as possible, a general sense of that posture being open, that sort of folding over. There's a sense of opening through the body, gently, spaciously. It's not always easy to come back to our embodied experience. We live a lot in the realms of the mind, of the mental spheres. So just to return to the slower rhythm of the earth body, extraordinary body, the result of millions, billions of years of evolutionary spark that we claim as our own, but really belongs to nature, will be handed back to the elements all too soon. Meanwhile, there's this precious gift of embodiment as a conduit between so many different influences, energetic processes, both personal, ancestral, collective, global, universal. So just taking a few moments to appreciate, rather than projecting these more diminished narratives on our body and who we think we are, just to appreciate this extraordinary gift of life itself, of embodiment, of presence. Bringing a sense of spacious, kindly receptivity as we gently encourage the mind, the mental energy that's moving so quickly, to just encourage that to begin to settle with the slower rhythm, sensation field of our embodied experience. It can often be helpful to take a few slower, deeper breaths, feeling the breath energy, this subtle life force, connecting us within the sacred web of life as participatory beings in this earthed realm with this spark of consciousness within this limitless citta heart mind, deathless heart mind that's receiving and present and illuminating this moment. Just settling with a slower rhythm, with the breath, illuminating the body, with the luminosity of the mind through the breath and awareness as we suffuse the body with this awareness, with breath, with slower, deeper breaths, filling the brain, the face, the head, the shoulders, the torso, arms, hands, down through the middle of the body, the pelvic area, down through the legs, to the feet, and then on the exhalation, softening, allowing the shoulders to drop, the face to soften, torso to soften, belly to soften, feeling into and experiencing the ground that we're resting the body on earth. Body is supported by earth. With each inhalation, untying the tangles, energetic tangles through the body, opening subtly the energetic pathways of the body with gentleness, embodying presence, and within that presence, the knowing, illumination of the heart mind, the citta, knowing just this moment as it is. Feeling the flow, the sensations, the sounds, mental formation, impressions. Coming into focus, being known directly, and seeing them shift and change into a different quality of experience. The movement within stillness, the stillness within movement.
You might need your bell.
Remembering we can return to a few slower, deeper breaths to steady, to ground, to slow down. It's a theme of this session, the light of Dharma in a world of shadows. Just connecting that light with the light of essential nature of consciousness itself, illuminating this deep prajna, knowing presence, receiving directly, connecting directly with how it is, within all that's arising within the field of our awareness. This awareness, this fundamental nature of citta, of mind, heart, without boundaries, transcends time, place, circumstance. And as the great realized ones say, all things are within this mind. All things are resident in awareness, to be known intimately, to be seen, to be contemplated, to be healed, liberated, loved, whatever shape or form or circumstance. This is the potential we have as practitioners. So aligning with this essential nature, this great stream of awakening, this timeless stream of presence, deep wisdom and compassion, deep realization, timelessness, deathlessness of the original heart, present within all, in all circumstance, within all time and space. Calling on all Dharma protectors, all holders and those that uplift, protective forces of compassion and deep wisdom, calling on all the subtle beings of light, the radiant beings, beings in all realms that uplift the good, the harmless, the beautiful, that help protect the elemental beings, the ancestors, forces within nature, within this Gaian cosmology of interconnection. All humans holding a prayer for peace within all realms, to lift the frequency of the planet, the frequency of love, connection, dissolving hate, untying the spells of delusion, absorbing the endless thirst of greed, awakening beings, aligning with all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, all the wise ones, all the realized ones, to offer a prayer, to send a frequency of peace for all, liberation for all, violence and hate, for the awakening of all at this time. This ancient heart mantra of Kuan Yin, of Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, Om Mani Padme Hum, sounding this to send this vibration, this prayer, this frequency within ourselves, within our group, and out without bounds of time and space or geography, to all beings everywhere, wherever is needed right now. So just take a few moments to stretch as we change set.
Here the rain has just started. Can you hear me okay? Yes. To contemplate this theme as we approach the shortest day and the longest night, and at the solstice, in the turning of the seasons and the increase of the light, just to reflect on this theme of light and shadow I'd like to contemplate with you all a short sutta, a short teaching that the Buddha gave in the Majjhima Nikaya. It's called the Angulimala Sutta. It's many of you have heard of Angulimala. Mala, we know mala, the beads. Anguli was a mala of fingers. It's a very ghoulish, frightening image. Angulimala was this feared bandit and killer at the time of the Buddha. So I want to, in this short discourse that the Buddha gave about this being, I want to read parts of it for you, and then let's reflect on it together. As the rain is coming down and the light element is just increasing a little bit here in the forest. I have heard that on one occasion the Blessed One was staying near Savatthi, Ajeta's grove, Anathapindika's monastery. And at that time in King Pasenadi's realm, there was a bandit named Angulimala, brutal, bloody-handed, devoted to killing and slaying, showing no mercy to living beings. He turned villages into non-villages, towns into non-towns, settled countryside into unsettled countryside. Having repeatedly killed human beings, he wore a garland, a mala, made of fingers. Then the Blessed One, early in the morning, having put on his robes and carrying his outer robe and bowl, went into Savatthi for alms, and having wandered for alms, and returning from his alms, after his meal, he set his lodging in order, and then carrying his robes and bowl, he went along the road where Angulimala the bandit was staying. Cowards, shepherds, farmers saw him going on the road where Angulimala was staying, and seeing the Buddha, they said, "Don't go along that road, contemplative." With the Buddha's robes and shaved head and bowl, he was known as a mendicant, a samana, a recluse. They say here contemplative. They said, "Don't go, for on that road is Angulimala, brutal, bloody-handed, devoted to killing, slaying, showing no mercy. He's turned villages into non-villages, towns into non-towns. He wears this garland." And then they told the Buddha, warning him, groups of 10, 20, 30, 40 men have gone along that road, and even they have fallen into Angulimala's hands. So even whole parties of men fell to Angulimala's hands. When this was said, the Blessed One kept going in silence. The Buddha just kept walking. A second time, a third time, the cowards, the shepherds, the farmers said, "Blessed One, don't go along that road. Contemplative. Groups of 10, 20, 30, 40 men have gone on that road, and even they have fallen into Angulimala's hands." The Blessed One kept going in silence. Then the scene shifts in the sutta. The bandit, Angulimala, saw the Blessed One coming from afar, and on seeing him, this thought occurred to him: isn't it amazing? Isn't it astounding? Groups of 10, 20, 30, and 40 men have gone along this road, and even they have fallen into my hands, and yet now this contemplative, this monk comes, attacking, as it were, alone and without a companion. Why don't I kill him? So Angulimala, taking up his sword and shield, buckling on his bow and quiver, followed right behind the Blessed One. Then the Blessed One willed a feat of psychic power. such that Angulimala, though running with all his might, could not catch up with the Blessed One, who was walking at a normal pace. So the Buddha used a psychic power so that he appeared to just be walking at the normal pace, and Angulimala was running full might and couldn't catch the Buddha. Then the thought, back to the sutta, occurred to Angulimala, isn't it amazing? Isn't it astounding? In the past, I've chased and seized even a swift-running elephant, a swift-running horse, a swift-running chariot, a swift-running deer. But now, even though I'm running with all my might, I can't catch up with this contemplative, this monk, walking at a normal pace. So Angulimala stopped and called out to the Blessed One, "Stop, monk, stop." "I have stopped, Angulimala," said the Buddha. "You stop." Then the thought occurred to Angulimala, these Sakyan contemplatives are speakers of truth, asserters of truth, and yet this contemplative, this monk, even while walking, says, "I've stopped." "Angulimala, you stop. Why don't I question him?" So Angulimala the bandit addressed this verse to the Blessed One. So this is Angulimala speaking to the Blessed One. "While walking, monk, you say I have stopped. But when I have stopped, you say I haven't. I ask you the meaning of this. How have you stopped? How haven't I?" The Buddha replies, "I have stopped, Angulimala, once and for all, having cast off violence towards all living beings. You, though, are unrestrained toward beings. That's how I've stopped, and you haven't." Now, this next stanza, which is back to Angulimala, there's a huge, profound shift in Angulimala's heart. He was really touched deeply by this psychic power, by this act of compassion, this courage. Here's what Angulimala said. He said, "At long last, a greatly revered, great seer for my sake has come to the great forest. Having heard your verse, in line with the Dhamma, I will go about having abandoned evil." So saying, the bandit hurled his sword and weapons over a cliff into a chasm, a pit. Then the bandit, the killer, Angulimala, paid homage to the feet of the well-gone one, of the Buddha, and right there requested the going forth. He said, I want to follow you. The awakened one, the great compassionate, great seer, the teacher of the world, along with his devas, then said to him, "Ehi bhikkhu." That was in the early days, that was the ordination. Ehi means come. Bhikkhu means come be a mendicant with me. Ehi bhikkhu. That in itself was the bhikkhuhood for Angulimala. This was probably maybe the first koan. This man in a rage. There's a whole backstory in the commentaries. We find out that Angulimala was betrayed in his youth by his fellow students. They lied and made his teacher think all kinds of false things about him, and he went into a rage, and just to get back at humanity, get back at this false teacher, he started killing people and wearing fingers. And as it said, you know, he turned towns into non-towns. He was brutal, without mercy. And yet, out of compassion, this monk, the Buddha, comes alone. But the Buddha realized he couldn't turn him around in just any old way. This, talk about a super athlete. Angulimala was able to run down a horse, and running full speed behind this monk that was walking at an easy pace, he couldn't catch him. That was the Buddha's psychic power. He used power. Then when Angulimala yelled, "Stop, monk!" And while the Buddha was walking easily, he replied, "I have stopped." Even while he was walking, "I have stopped. You should stop." And yet Angulimala was sitting there stopped. First koan. What? He was stopped in his tracks. And that's then when this conversation, when he asked the Buddha, what does this mean? The Buddha talked about he's renounced violence, heedlessness. And at that moment, the compassion of the Buddha touched his heart. And he became a follower of the Buddha. And then he became an attendant of the Buddha, and then went back to the monastery. Now, at that time, a large crowd of people gathered at the gates of the king and saying, "Hey, we got a murderer here. You got to do something about him." So the king takes he didn't take 10, 20, 30, 40. He took 500. It says, well, these people came and protested the king. "You got to stamp out this killer." So King Pasenadi, I'm reading from the sutta, with a cavalry of roughly 500 horsemen, drove out of Savatthi, entered the monastery, because they had heard this bandit was in the monastery. Driving as far as he could for the chariots, he got down and then walked on foot. And on arrival, having bowed down to the Buddha, the Blessed One, the Buddha says to him, "What is it, great king? Has King Bimbisara provoked you?" So the Buddha sees this cavalry's coming. Another king, neighboring king, was Bimbisara of Magadha. So he says to Pasenadi, "What, has this other king provoked you? Or have the Lichavis of Vesali or some other hostile king?" "No, Lord," said Pasenadi, King Pasenadi. "King Bimbisara hasn't provoked me, nor the Lichavis of Vesali, nor some other hostile king. There is a bandit in my realm named Angulimala, brutal, bloody-handed, devoted to killing, slaying, showing no mercy to living beings. He's turned villages into non-villages, towns into non-towns, settled countryside into unsettled countryside." "Having repeatedly killed human beings, he wears a garland made of fingers. I am going to stamp him out." That's what King Pasenadi said to the Buddha. And then the Buddha said to Pasenadi, "Great king, suppose you were to see Angulimala with his hair and his beard shaved off, wearing the ochre robe, having gone forth from home into homelessness, refraining from killing, refraining from taking what is not given, refraining from telling lies, living the holy life on one meal a day, virtuous, of fine character. What would you do?" The king said, "Well, we would bow down to him, Lord, rise up to greet him, offer him a seat, offer him food, robes, alms food, lodgings, medicines. But how could there be such virtue and restraint in an unvirtuous, evil character?" Now at that time, Venerable Angulimala was sitting not far from the Blessed One. So the Blessed One, pointing with his right arm, said to King Pasenadi, that great king is Angulimala. King Pasenadi was frightened, terrified, his hair standing on end. So the Blessed One, sensing the king's fear and hair-raising awe, said, Don't be afraid, great king. He poses no danger to you. Then the king's fear subsided. And the king approached him and said, What's your father's clan? What's your mother's clan? He said, My father is Gaga, great king. My mother is Mantani. Then Master Gaga Mantani Putta. So the king addresses him as the master son of Gaga and Mantani. That's what Putta means, son of Gaga Mantani Putta. The king said, I'll be responsible for your robes and lodgings and medicines. But at that time, Angulimala was a wilderness dweller. He was living quite austerely, just wearing one set of robes. So he said to the king, Enough, great king, my triple robe is complete. And then the king goes back to the Buddha and said, It's amazing, Lord. How has the Blessed One tamed the untamed, pacified the unpeaceful, brought to Nibbana those who, which is called here the unbinding, to those who were bound up? For what we could not tame even with blunt or bladed weapons, the Blessed One is tamed without blunt or bladed weapons. We must go now. And then the Buddha said to the king, okay, do what you think is fit. So we have this incredible turnaround. And then, so now this bandit Angulimala is one of the Buddhist disciples. He's going on alms round, and while he's on alms round, he sees a woman in the middle of childbirth in agony. It was a breech birth. He hears her moaning and sees her suffering. And the thought occurs to Angulimala, how tormented are living beings, how tormented are living beings. Then he returns to the Buddha and he recounts to the Buddha, Lord, in the alms round, I saw this woman suffering a breech birth. And the thought occurred to me, how tormented are living beings. In that case, the Buddha said to Angulimala, go to that woman and say this, say, sister, since I was born, I do not recall intentionally killing a living being. Through this truth, may there be well-being for you and well-being for your child. But Lord, said Angulimala, wouldn't that be a lie? I have intentionally killed many living beings. Then in that case, Angulimala, go to that woman and on arrival say to her, sister, since I was born in the noble birth. This is the being reborn in the Dhamma. Changing the lineage, being reborn in the Dhamma, taking as our alignment, restraint, awareness of how things are. As an aside, who says Buddhism doesn't have good news? Kittisaro, I'll get back on the track. Oh, okay. Wouldn't that be a lie? And the Buddha says, no, tell the woman, sister, since I was born in the noble birth, I do not recall intentionally killing a living being. Through this truth, may there be well-being for you and for the child. And Angulimala did that, recited that. Since my noble birth, I do not recall harming a living being. By the power of this truth, may there be well-being for you and the child. And that has become a protection chant, chanted now for centuries since that time. And Angulimala practice, so he becomes that from a serial killer. He becomes a healer. And he practices and he gets enlightened eventually. And then later, while he was on alms round, he still has this reputation of being this terrible killer. People throw clods, people throw stones, people throw, he gets really harmed. He comes back one day broken, his bowl broken, his robes ripped, bleeding. He even lost an eye. The Blessed One saw him coming from afar, and he said, "Bear it, Brahmin. Bear with it the fruit of karma that would have burned you in hell for many years, many hundreds of years, many thousands of years. You are now experiencing in the here and now." All that he was awakened, but he was just patiently allowing the fruit of the karma, and the Buddha is just encouraging, just be patient, allow all that. Then Angulimala, having gone into seclusion, experienced the bliss of release. So he continued to get more and more enlightened, more and more free. And then these are some verses from, and we're coming back to the light. These are verses after Angulimala was fully enlightened. He says, and some of these, many of these have become verses in the Dhammapada. So the story of the turning around of Angulimala, many of his verses have become memorized by countless disciples over the millennia. So these are some of the verses from Angulimala. He said, "Who once was heedless, but later is not, brightens the world like the moon set free from a cloud." So there's shadows. The light is obscured when the cloud. But who once was heedless, heedlessness, not really being attentive, not really being aware, there's obscuration. But when that heedlessness is abandoned, that brightens the world like the moon set free from a cloud. His evil deed, his own past evil deeds, all the harming he did, replaced with skillfulness, brightens the world like the moon set free from a cloud. Whatever young monk or nun, someone who's young, dedicating themselves to this Buddha's teaching of looking into the cause of suffering and the ending of suffering. The verse is, whatever young monk or nun devotes himself to the Buddha's bidding, brightens the world like the moon set free from a cloud. And then he says, may even my enemies hear talk of the Dhamma. May even my enemies devote themselves to the Buddha's bidding. May even my enemies associate with those people who are peaceful, good, get others to accept the Dhamma. May even my enemies hear the Dhamma, the true teachings, time and again, from those who advise patience, endurance, those who praise non-opposition. So before his life was contention, was fighting, he's talking about the power of non-opposition, patience. For surely he's talking about his enemies, wouldn't harm me or anyone else. They would attain peace. They would protect the feeble and the firm. Here's one of his famous, Angulimala's famous lines that's in the Dhammapada. Irrigators guide the water. Fletchers shape the arrow shaft. Those are those who make the weapons of arrows. Carpenters shape the wood. The wise control themselves. Irrigators guide the water. Fletchers shape the arrow shaft. Carpenters shape the wood. The wise control themselves. some tame with blunt sticks, trying to get peace with force, with hooks, with whips, but without any weapons. I was tamed by the one who is such. He's talking about the Buddha. Tatta, Tathagata. Tatta means such. Gata means agata, and gata means come and gone into suchness, into as-isness. I was tamed, said Angulimala, without a weapon. The Buddha didn't use weapons against me. And what was his new name from the one who wore the finger of garlands? His new name was doer of no harm. The Buddha gave him the new name, doer of no harm. But I used to be a doer of harm. Today I am true to my name, for I harm no one at all. We're just contemplating what obscures, what dims the light. The Buddha says our nature, the heart is luminous. He called the heart the original brightness, but it's obscured by the greed, by the hatred, by the confusion. And what really frees up the heart? And when we started this taking refuge in Buddha, the centrality of this awareness, which can learn to recognize the skillful and the unskillful, when we learn to restrain this unconscious reactivity, these precepts, restraining from harming. Remember at the beginning, the Buddha called them great gifts. It looks so simple, just not following an impulse of hostility. Thinking, oh, I'm going to solve this by crushing. That's how he was trying to solve his problems before, just crush everyone, his enemies. He felt righteous because that's a whole nother story, how he had been betrayed in his youth. But hate is never overcome by hate. We know that famous line of the Buddha, only through non-hate, without weapons. Angulimala was turned around. He was so touched by the compassion. And then he felt from before of being so into just getting back, he felt the suffering of this woman in childbirth who was stuck. It was impossible. The baby was stuck. How, Lord, there's so much suffering. Since my noble birth, I cannot recall having harmed anyone. By the power of this truth, may there be well, may you be well, and the child be well. From a killer became a healer, all of us. We have this light. We have this capacity for healing. What begins the light? One, acknowledging that there's suffering already. That's the first noble truth. There is dukkha. That's already a truth, a humble truth, a sensitive to the way things are truth. It has a cause. This torment is caused by grasping and aversion, greed and hatred and delusion. And that needs to be abandoned. And this activity of relinquishing harm, training ourselves, allows this inherent luminosity of the heart to shine. And we can call on the wise ones. There are wise ones. We can feel, oh, it's okay for them, but I can't do it. And Angulimala, a serial killer, became one of the great arahats, became a healer. Just even by the truth of, even when he wasn't yet enlightened, I haven't, since my birth, noble birth, since we sincerely begin again by the power of this sincerity of leaving behind harm. May there be well-being. This is this path we do of prayers, our prayers, and calling on the power of Kuan Yin and the power of the awakened ones to instruct us. We can turn this around and trust. Don't imagine, don't fix our enemies thinking, oh, it's impossible, they'll never change. The Buddha didn't give up on Angulimala. He became the harmless one. Don't give up on ourselves. Don't give up on our fellow beings. The return of the light. When we leave behind in moments heedlessness, our light can shine. So I want to turn the next part over to a shining light in my life, in our life. Thanissara, please.
Thank you, Kittisaro. Let's just take a moment to stretch again. Yes, this is this is a really powerful story from the Buddha's life, and archetypal story as well, of course, of turning the worst impulses that we have as humans, the potential for transformation. And that potential, always something that we can hold out for, that's been exemplified in this story. So while I'm listening to it, I'm translating it into, I think for me, there's always the incentive and impulse to apply, how does this apply to the time and place we're in and what's arising within the context we're in, and how can we distill these timeless principles and apply the medicine of the Dharma, both inspired by these stories and then translating them. So I suppose my mind has been moving in various, just generally speaking, in terms of what's happening now in the world, and just this feeling. It is this feeling of the dominance of the planet being overshadowed by increased levels of violence to try and claim dominance over others, and how this is such an old story, but doing it with increasingly horrific levels of weaponry, employing things like AI, which is a very dangerous track that we're moving down, not because perhaps AI in and of itself is dangerous, but linked in to what is increasingly a global leadership that is more psychopathic than wise, with enormous powers to harm and distort and control and dominate and oppress. That it really is, we've really we're really sort of these shadows that have emerged. I'm sort of seeing them as both as you know, over sort of overshadowing human consciousness itself and stimulating these very ancient stories and trauma points that are very wedded and woven into deep levels of fear, and this is a story of revenge, Angulimala, these cycles of revenge that know no end to quench a sort of bloodlust of revenge. These are very primal stories for us as humans. You know, the history is littered with these stories and with these with atrocities inflicted upon one another in the name of all sorts of godly interests. Very suspect gods, I have to say, that should be questioned and dethroned, in my opinion. If God's calling for violence and war, then really this isn't really helpful in this time and in this moment. Of this moment, really, of the potential, as the Buddha said, you know, within dukkha, within suffering, the suffering is the cause for liberation. Actually, it doesn't have to just devolve into endless cycles of generating more suffering, more violence, more pain, to try and find the solution to the end of suffering. That clearly is not the way that brings about an end. It is only through evolving and moving out of those cycles that we can break the cycle, that we can break the spell of the shadows, and the shadows become phantom tigers. But it can only be done if we're willing, really, not only to evolve inwardly consciously, but as the Buddha did, demonstrate that consciousness in our acts, in what we say, and where we stand in this world at this time and how we show up. So there is a very great in sort of initiation, I think, through suffering. And when it's on a collective level, as we're seeing, there is a great demand in that process for us to find, where are we in all of this? Where are we personally? Where are we collectively? Where are we in the Dharma? And how must we respond? So those are some of the themes that I'm with. And at the same time, really recognizing how, with the flood of social media and the immediacy of being able to see, you know, what's actually effectively happening now, the great acts of horrific acts of violence in the Middle East, but not only there, around the planet. We've seen it in Ukraine and Russia. We've seen it in the Horn of Africa and Sudan and so on, and ongoing silent wars like the Congo, which is actually the biggest war that's been going on forever. You know, it predicates upon seeing, you know, seeing the shadow clearly and naming what it is before we can actually find the right response. But in this flood of information and visual impressions and the emergence of what our lifestyles and the myths really of our civilized world, what they're predicated upon, you know, not predicated upon a lot of creativity, a lot of inspiration, a lot of, you know, extraordinary, beautiful acts of the highest human potential that we can have, but also predicated on massive violence, genocide, horrors, enslavement, and so on, and colonialism, classism, and all the ways that human society is stratified and structured on levels of oppression. Those are all becoming extremely visible as the veils are being ripped away. You know, so to see really the bare bones, and at this moment, there's like these two forces, really, this forces of increasing shadow and violence as the world heats up, as it becomes more divided, as governments become more authoritarian and oppressive. And at the same time, there's this impulse that we can see in the horror response to horror, you know, that's the world standing up and saying, not in our name. This isn't in our name. You know, we don't stand with this. And we can stand, so we can stand in ways that proliferates and continues separation, because injected into that stance, the extreme othering, the fostering of hatred and aversion and projection. But we can also create a different kind of stance. And this is, I think, the thing that needs to thread out in the Dharma world. The idea that we can be neutral can often be seen to be really just endorsing what's happening, being voiceless. We can actually be seen to be, maybe we don't internally, to endorse what's happening, crimes against humanity that are happening and around the world. And at the moment we're seeing that in Gaza very much, including impacting the hostages taken. And in a way, if that's how we interpret the Dharma, to be in the capacities that we work within, that the only response can be to say nothing, then it kind of, in a way, furthers the undermining of the moral fabric of society. So, is there a way that we can stand without this inflaming the separative consciousness? And as Kittisaro, in this powerful story of Angulimala and the life of the Buddha, where he did stand against war in the middle of warring parties, didn't always succeed in lessening the violence. In fact, his own people got slaughtered. He couldn't stop the colliers who came to take out his clan, the Sakyans. And that was all predicated on revenge. That was a revenge killing. So these things are very old stories. But he tried, he tried. This is the thing. It's not, to try is the thing, to try and find that middle way. It's not, when speaking out can be often equated with taking a political position. To actually understand a political positioning is very different than a moral stance. Political positioning is, it's not that political positioning isn't within our rights as a citizen, but if you're talking about a Sangha or a Dharma response, or a spiritually based response, or humane response, I think what we're seeing when leadership around the world has been hijacked, there's no real powerful, wise leadership. Like, for example, we had at the ending of apartheid, it helped bring about the end of apartheid through Mr. Mandela and the struggle heroes. But, so it predicates upon, it's a duty for ourselves to find that voice for humanity, for holding together a moral, compassionate fabric of humanities, because without that, things can easily devolve into the most brutish forces of whoever has the most weaponry, whoever has the most power. And so that's kind of where I see this where we're sort of oscillating on these edges at this moment. And so, political positioning is very context driven, around ideologies or gaining power in a certain way that often is very, now increasingly divisive. Whereas really a moral stance is more timeless, rooted in ethical principles that we timelessly agree on through age-old agreements of what is important for us, things like fairness and justice, human rights, rights for all beings, rights for nature, founded in love and compassion and caring. So I think at this, this, in a way, we've been sort of launched into at a planetary level, collective level, as a different curriculum than we've been in. The whole curriculum is, it's not really, has gone along with a lot of convenience and comfort, particularly in the northern hemisphere, or the highly developed countries. Developed meaning not necessarily through wisdom, but developed through through the power that we've had to industrialize, to the power of technology, the power of resources, the power of wealth, and so on, to build extraordinary, cities and all the rest of it, that we're, everything that was, well, everything that I can't, sorry, I wish I was more articulate at this moment, but just to, I think we know what we're talking about, that we've built a civilization that's incredibly powerful and incredibly smart, but not wise, not rooted in wisdom and compassion, not necessarily always rooted in these timeless human values. So at this moment, the Buddha took that chance. I mean, I think the psychic power of the Buddha, he clearly had these powers, but I think the real psychic power of the Buddha was the Dharma that he was holding, was the light of the Dharma, was this deep ethical compassion, even for the most craven person, to hold that compassion and to see there's always this potential to turn that around. And that's a very hard one for us, because we can, it's not to say that we can't call out. He definitely called out what Angulimala was doing. He definitely challenged him and told him to stop. So there again, we have a precedent, to stop the violence, to stop the normalization that we as humans will continue this endless, timeless cycle that we've been in of killing and violence to sort out our problems. And it really, if you looked at that psychologically, trying to kill, often what we're trying to kill is our own shadow, our own creation. There's been oppression, you create the equal and opposite, not necessarily equal, but you create a shadow force. And so trying to, the idea of the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, killing Hamas, while they're actually strengthening, is, predicated upon not really having that nuanced understanding that we never really kill what has been created in response to our own lack of deeper understanding of historical inequities. So these aren't easy answers, these aren't easy ways, but I think it's a sort of laziness almost to say, well, we'll just be neutral, we won't say anything, and we'll just hang out and hold a sign of peace. But what does peace really mean? What is our duty? So these are the sorts of questions I've been really exploring how, and continually. I mean, it's not just this current story that we're in of our, it applies also to how do we respond to the recent really hijacking of COP28, hijacked by the fossil fuel companies, setting in motion absolute devastation for very near times that many of us will live to see, and certainly for the children and grandchildren. What is our response? So my encouragement, and I feel it's really a precedent set by the Buddha, is that the Dharma isn't an internal process only, but it is linked to right action of the Eightfold Path. It is linked to the right kind of response. And the Buddha, we won't always get it right. I mean, the Buddha made mistakes, actually. He taught a meditation method that went wrong and actually landed up on aversion, and landed up people actually taking their lives out of aversion for this body. And that's when he actually switched his meditation method. I mean, imagine that nowadays, that would be a complete catastrophe. And it's not exactly that one's always going to, I mean, that's an extreme case, rarely mentioned, but there it is. But it's a question of being willing, like the Buddha. He tried to find that way, tried to really explore. When he tried to stop a warring army wiping out his people. And he understood the causes of karma. In the end, he couldn't. He understood that this doesn't end. Violence doesn't end anything. It just perpetuates more violence. So this, I think, is the light of the Dharma. This is the message of the Dharma. Whatever the circumstance, whatever the situation, for the longer haul is really to stand against violence, to stand against atrocities, wherever and whoever is perpetuating them. And we can do that without perpetuating hate in the heart. We can do that holding compassion for all. We can do that without creating more division. So there is, I think, always a middle way to find in every circumstance, and to find that middle way where we hold clearly a moral integrity and we act on that. That is within, I think, our curriculum to do in this time. We can't rely on leaders. We can't rely on these huge forces of violence, but enough people stand up and hold that voice. Then it starts to create, as we're seeing now, actually, a sea change. And I think if we, in the Dharma, don't do that, or in spiritual communities around the world, mindfulness communities and so on, I think that was regrettable. It was regrettable. And we can't always do it in every circumstance, and it may be subtle, maybe nuanced. For some of us, it may be stronger. But it's how can we hold that real desire for as with Angular Mala, for that real heart shift? How can we hold that as a duty, a Dharma duty, a Dharma response, a necessity of the heart, and to realize that it's effective? It has an effect, it has a resonance, it can touch hearts, that all these hearts caught up in perpetuating violence, that seed of violence is within us all. We don't know what we would do when taken to an edge or inflamed within a collective narrative, let loose with massive weaponry. Hopefully we wouldn't get caught up, but we all are capable of getting caught up. And it is that's why the Buddha had his 5 precepts. These are the guardrails, these are the guardians of the world. When they are eroded internally and collectively, then the demons take over. There's no guardians of the world anymore. So to uphold those, to uphold non-harming, to find ways to do it, particularly in this time, is, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful way of engaging. It's a beautiful way of coming together. And it's even more beautiful when we have the light of compassion held for all, regardless, liberating all, regardless. This is the Bodhicitta vow. This is the timeless power. This is the psychic power. The Bodhicitta heart. And there's so many examples of that, holding people, beings that have held that heart, collectives that have held that heart and completely changed the course of history. Because it has the power of the universe with us. It has this power, however long the shadows are there, they cannot dim this light of Dharma. This light, actually the Dharma in the end is within this heart, our hearts, as our incredible teacher Ajahn Chah would say, the light of the living Dharma cannot be extinguished. And particularly when we hold to that Dharma, it can shine and bring a beautiful frequency into the world, so needed now. So don't underestimate. I don't think, and when Ajahn Chah was asked how did he do what he did, the accomplishments through his life, overseeing over 100 monasteries, going right until the end, until his body gave up, traveling to the West, teaching. Very unique being, very able to meet people where they were outside of his cultural context directly, very effective. He just said, I had the courage. I had the courage. How did he put that?
I dared to do.
I dare to do. I dare to do. So maybe may some of that courage of Ajahn Chah, may that be imparted to us when we wobble, when we feel frightened, when we feel doubtful, to really know we're aligning with a great stream of awakening as the Buddha, with that word, one word, stop. Just stop. Stop harm for all and bring this light and let it shine. And our lights together will create a great luminosity, a great frequency, a great upliftment, and a great ethical boundary for the planet that we need, a guardrail that we so badly need, that says, no, we will not accept this. We will not devolve into some chaotic, violent slog out until the last resource is left on this planet. That is not what we're going to do. We're going to evolve. We're going to take that leap and we're going to do it together. So those are my thoughts this morning on this great, powerful, profound Angulimala story. I'm sorry I've gone over time in terms of Q&A, but I leave you to Q&A inwardly around some of these themes. And I look forward to our ongoing collaboration together. And thank you all so very much for showing up for everything you're doing. Don't underestimate not only the actions, but the prayers we're holding, the practice we're doing, the dedication of punya, of blessings. It's all vital and important. So wishing you, bring my beloved back into the picture here. Wishing you all much peace over the holiday season, over it, even though in spite of the fact that most things aren't that peaceful, especially getting together with families and loved ones can be a bit rocky. But however, and if you're on your own, holding the heart of light, that we're all together as we listen in to our own heart, we're listening in with all living beings in all time, in all spheres, and we can hold a prayer for it all. And yeah, peace, love, blessings always. Stay well, go well. And thank you so much.